wicked wretches.
Shakespeare's King Lear, which first appeared in the quarto edition of 1608, is a tragedy which has provoked great debate over the centuries. King Lear has been described by academics as a Jacobean dramatic tragedy, and it does seem to have a universal quality which allows it to transcend the barriers of space and time. It deals with the quintessential nature of man. Shakespeare manages to open up the huge question of what it means to be a human being, looking at how people relate to one another. The drama revolves around one man, Lear, and his lack of insight leads to a series of tragedies. In his declining years, Lear, the central tragic hero, fails to understand his relationships with those closest to him, and he makes a series of fatal mistakes which plunge his entire society into chaos.
In recent decades, King Lear has come to supplant Hamlet in the popular imagination, I think, as the greatest of all Shakespeare's plays, in the sense, I think, that it presents the greatest challenges to audiences as well as to performers, and also, in some ways, the greatest rewards.
I think King Lear perhaps is the greatest of Shakespeare's tragedies because it faces so directly the fundamental questions about human existence. It never pulls any punches. It goes, as one might say, for the jugular, time after time after time.
I think this is because it is so clearly a play that's profoundly concerned with very serious issues. It's a very earnest play. It's a play which is concerned with old age, which comes to everybody if they're lucky. It's concerned with filial ingratitude, to use the phrase in the play itself, that is to say with relations between parents and children, which again is something of universal interest. And ultimately, of course, it's concerned very profoundly with death.
It asks the fundamental questions. In the middle of the play, when Lear is thinking about the evil that his daughter Regan has done to him, he says, let them anatomize Regan, see what breeds about her heart. Is there no cause in nature that makes these hard hearts? We'd love to know the answer to that question still today, and there's the play asking it directly.
The mind's free, the body's delicate. This tempest in my mind doth my senses take all feeling else, save what beats there.
Lear is a moving play because it involves the audience in the suffering of Lear himself, especially. It involves us in his progress through the play. We recognize perhaps initially that he's a faulty man. He's not a perfect man at all. We recognize the folly of his actions, which is very much pointed up by the fool in the play.
Tell me, my daughters, since we now divest us both of rule, interests of territory, cares of state, which of you, shall we say, doth love us most?
Lear's daughters, Goneril, Regan and Cordelia, are essential to the plot. It is their response in the opening scene of the play which set the story in motion. The sisters must publicly declare their love for their father, and if they respond well, he will award them each a third of his kingdom. Goneril and Regan are only too happy to flatter their father. However, Cordelia's refusal to compete with her sisters in this way is unacceptable to Lear, and he banishes her to France.
Let it be so. Thy truth, then, be thy dower. For by the sacred radiance of the sun, the mysteries of Hecate and the night, by all the operation of the orbs, from whom we do exist and cease to be, here I disclaim all my paternal love, propinquity, and property of blood, and as a stranger to my heart and me, hold thee from this forever!
The women set the play in motion by their response to Lear's extraordinary request for a declaration of love. Goneril and Regan are eloquent and elegant in telling lies. Cordelia actually finds it impossible to tell the truth, because the truth is that she does love her father, and she can't say so in public. She cannot, as she puts it, heave her heart into her mouth, whereas her sisters have the glib and oily art, again Cordelia's phrase, to make persuasive and convincing something which doesn't exist.
Cordelia is the more clearly virtuous character. Of course, it's possible to fault her, just as it's possible to fault most people. Perhaps she should have been a bit more tactful in that opening scene. Perhaps it wasn't very kind of her to say simply nothing in response to Lear's request for an expression of love. But ultimately, she does stand very much for goodness in the play, I think. Whether it's possible to say that they reflect aspects of King Lear himself is a matter of interpretation, I think. You may say that there is harshness in Lear, as there clearly is. He banishes Cordelia, and that perhaps aligns him with Goneril and Regan. There is also great gentleness in Lear, as we see in the later part of the play, particularly in the reunion scene with Cordelia, and that aligns him with Cordelia. But the gentleness in Lear comes, as I say, in the second part of the play, and may be felt not to be an inherent part in the Lear we meet in the earlier scenes, but perhaps the result of the experiences that Lear undergoes during the course of the play. In other words, that Lear himself may be regarded as a learning character, as a man who develops in the course of the play, and that part of the experience that the audience undergoes in seeing the play or reading it is in watching Lear turn from one sort of man into another sort of man.
The play focuses on Lear and the journey he makes. This journey of understanding takes place out on the heath, in the middle of a chaotic storm, which reflects the state of Lear's mind. He descends into madness, but ironically becomes aware of the frailty of man. King Lear is very much a play about an elderly man who has misjudged and miscalculated throughout his life.
Kill you, ingratitude! I will punish. Oh, no! I will weep no more! In such a night! To shut me out! Regan! Goneril!
There are key speeches on the heath which show Lear as a learner, as somebody who has begun to be able to see through his own sufferings how much other people suffer. And the recipients of his compassion, of his sympathy, are the fool and Edgar. Poor naked wretches, wheresoe'er ye be, he says, that bide the pelting of this pitiless storm. He wishes that he were able to, as he says, shake the superflux to the poor. He wishes he were able to take excess from those who have too much and give it to those who have too little. And this is a point at which we sense that Lear is learning a social lesson, and that he's done so partly as the result of suffering. And I think in the later part of the play, Lear is shown as somebody who is much more capable of compassionate behavior to people outside himself than he was in the earlier scenes of the play.
Wheresoever you are, that bide the pelting of this pitiless storm, how shall your houseless heads and unfed sides, your looped and windowed raggedness, defend you from seasons such as these? Oh, I have ta'en too little care of this. Take physic, pomp, expose thyself to feel what wretches feel.
He suffers so much in the storm, for example. He suffers so much both internally and externally. Externally because of the storm, but internally because of what he himself calls the tempest in my mind. And the tempest in his mind causes greater suffering, one feels, than the external tempest. The audience can easily identify with that.
Throughout the play, Lear is shadowed by characters who feel a very strong loyalty towards him. They counterbalance characters such as Goneril, Regan and Edmund, who are all busy trying to further their own ends. Kent and the Fool repeatedly warn Lear of the mistakes he is making with his daughters. Kent even pays the same price as Cordelia for his forthright opinions and is banished. He returns disguised to help Lear.
Royal Lear, whom I have ever honoured as my king, loved as my father, as my master followed, as my great patron thought on in my prayers.
The bow is bent and drawn. Make from the shaft.
Let it fall, rather, though the fork invade the region of my heart. Be Kent unmannerly when Lear is mad!
I think both Kent and the Fool are loyal to Lear because they love Lear. It's very basic. But I think there is a political dimension to Kent's loyalty which is entirely absent from the Fool's. It's Kent who in the first scene protests at the political folly of dividing up the kingdom. It's Kent who comes back to serve Lear because, as he puts it, Lear has in his face that which I would fain call master, authority. It's Kent, it's sketchily shown in the play, but enough for us to understand what's going on, who obviously has some sort of spy system or system of messengers getting information to and back from Cordelia when she has invaded the kingdom with the French army. So I think Kent, although his loyalty is fundamentally one of personal affection, has that political dimension which is completely absent from the Fool.
Modern audiences may find it difficult to relate to the Fool because he had a particular social function in Shakespeare's time that doesn't exist today. The Fool was a professional entertainer kept in royal courts, there in order to entertain the king or the queen. But also because the Fool often became very intimate with his master, he was able often to say things which the more official counsellors of the king, the statesmen around him, were not able to say. He could speak home truths in a way that was very valuable often for the ruler. And that's what's happening in this play, I think. The Fool is able to say things to King Lear that people like the Earl of Kent, for example, wouldn't be able to say. But he says it obliquely. He says it not through direct statement often, but through little stories, little parables, that sir that serves for gain, and so on. He has these little snatches of song, and if Lear can listen to them, he'll be able to learn about his own situation. So I think the Fool is an important character in helping Lear to understand himself.
When was thou wont to be so full of music, Sirrah?
I have used it, nuncle, ever since thou madest thy daughters thy mothers. For when thou gavest them the rod and puttest down thine own breeches, then they for sudden joy did weep, and I for sorrow sung, that such a king should play bo peep and go the fools among.
King Lear has a subplot which virtually mirrors the main plot. Gloucester, one of Lear's old faithful servants, has two grown-up sons, Edgar and Edmund. Like Lear, Gloucester fails to understand the true nature of his children. The similarity in the mistakes they both make strengthens the main themes of the play. They have both been blind to reality and pay a high price for their lifelong mistakes.
What paper were you reading? Nothing, my lord. No? What needed in that terrible dispatch of it into your pocket? Let's see. Come, if it be nothing, I shall not need spectacles.
I do beseech you, sir, pardon me. It is a letter from my brother that I have not all read, and for so much as I have perused, I find it not fit for your looking.
Give me the letter, sir.
I think Shakespeare has constructed the play on a sort of parallel father's theme. King Lear and three daughters, Gloucester and two sons, both of them expecting absolutely as of right, unqualified duty from their children, and both of them getting a very sharp surprise and rude awakening.
It's very typical of the design, of the self-conscious design of this play, that one of them, Lear, suffers primarily in the mind. Partly, of course, he suffers in the body, certainly, but he goes mad, putting it simply. The climax of Lear's suffering is mental suffering, the madness which overtakes him on the heath, which results in that deeply moving scene between Lear and Gloucester. Gloucester also goes through what we might call a purgatorial experience, but the climax of Gloucester's suffering is physical. It is the blinding, that horrible scene of the blinding, which many of us prefer not to watch, but which is part of the fundamental unsentimentality of the play, I think, that Shakespeare forces us to experience the results of evil in the blinding of Gloucester.
He that will think to live till he be old, give me some help.
I think both of them go through a kind of learning curve, which is sort of paradoxical at its essence. Gloucester loses his sight, and the joke is the play's joke, it's not a very savoury joke, having lost his sight, he begins to see things clearly. Then Edgar was belied. And Lear, equally paradoxically, loses his reason, goes mad, and then begins to understand. They're both following those parallel courses, I think, in that sense.
Gloucester might be regarded as being morally responsible for his suffering, in the sense that, as is clearly brought out in the opening passage of the play, his illegitimate son, the bastard Edmund, and a lot is made of bastardy in the play, was begotten after the legitimate son, Edgar. In other words, he was begotten after Gloucester was already married. And this point is rammed home at a later point in the play, when it said, "The dark and vicious place where thee he got cost him his eyes." There's an actual drawing of a moral point in the play. Now, the play is not simplistically moralistic, but nevertheless, it does have a very firm moral basis, and that is part of it, I think.
Edmund is illegitimate, leaving Edgar as Gloucester's sole legal heir. Edmund is jealous and resentful. He hatches an evil plot to lead Gloucester to believe that Edgar means to murder him in order to gain his inheritance more quickly. The brothers' characters are very different.
Thou, nature, art my goddess. To thy law, my services are bound.
Edmund is the character in the play who gets to talk to the audience, and we always enjoy characters who talk to us. Hamlet and Macbeth are built on that very principle as plays. And when he does talk to the audience in those early soliloquies, "Thou, nature, art my goddess, I should have been what I am, had the maidenly star in the firmament twinkled on my bastardizing," he really is making us laugh, making us understand the kind of determination that this outsider, this outcast of society, has to make a space for himself.
Wherefore should I stand in the plague of custom, and permit the curiosity of nations to deprive me, for that I am some 12 or 14 moonshines lag of a brother? Why, bastard? Wherefore, base? Though my dimensions are as well compact, my mind as generous, and my shape as true as honest madam's issue, why brand they us with base? With baseness, bastardy base.
As the play progresses, though, the emptiness of that purely selfish mode of living grows more and more clear. There is nothing at all beyond the self for the Edmunds, the Gonerills and Regans of this play.
It is his hand, my lord, but I hope his heart is not in the contents.
Has he never before sounded you in this business?
Never, my lord. But I have heard him oft maintain it to be fit that sons at perfect age and fathers declined, the father should be as ward to the son, and the son manage his revenue.
Villain.
Shakespeare rarely is completely black and white in his portrayal of people. And Edmund has his moment at the end of the play when he repents in time to send a messenger to try to save Cordelia. It fails. But Edmund does have his moment of penitence. Edgar, of course, is an obvious contrast to Edmund. Edgar is the good son, whereas Edmund is the bad one. Edmund tricks his father, Gloucester, into believing that Edgar is disloyal to him. That thrusts Edgar into disguise. He disguises himself as a beggar, a bedlam beggar, as they were known. He takes on the persona, he takes on the identity of Tom o' Bedlam, the sort of man who would go around begging, hoping to receive alms.
He's also, to some extent, to oversimplify. There's something almost, perhaps unfair, but there's something almost culpably naive about Edgar not seeing what's going on at the beginning of the play. He almost deserves what's happened to him for being so stupid. Perhaps that's to put oneself slightly in the Goneril, Regan, Edmund camp, to say that stupidity deserves what it gets. But there's a touch of that, I think, about it.
In cunning, I must draw my sword upon you. Draw! Seem to defend yourself. Now quit you well. Yield! Coming for my father! Right ho! Fly, brother!
Finally, there is an element of reconciliation. There is goodness as well as evil in the play. And the central good figure in the play is Lear's youngest daughter, Cordelia. And the most moving scene in the play, to my mind, is the scene of reunion, of reconciliation between Lear and his daughter. When Lear, who has been mad, attains a tenuous sanity. He comes back to sanity, though his grip on reality seems rather slight at this point in the play. But there he is, reunited with Cordelia. There is Cordelia forgiving him. There is him forgiving her. It's a scene of incredible emotional power.
Do not laugh at me, for as I am a man, I think this lady is my child, Cordelia.
And so I am.
Be your tears wet? Yes.
It's a frequently harrowing play, and it remains so till the end, it has to be said. With the, not after the blinding of Gloucester, there is the terrible news of the death of Cordelia, which is another shocking blow for the audience. And of course, Lear himself dies. Nevertheless, I think there is something of a counterpart. There is some consolation in the play. There is the consolation in the reunion of Lear with Cordelia. But also it depends a lot, I think, what you make of the very end of the play, of Lear's end as he looks at Cordelia, and Cordelia is dead. It is horrible that she's dead. It's very sad that she's dead. On the other hand, she is there. Cordelia has existed. And it seems to me that at the end of the play, we may be conscious of the good that Cordelia could embody, as something of a consolation, and also of the outpouring of love that Lear gives to Cordelia, which he hadn't been able to give in the earlier part of the play. Lear, at the beginning of the play, is not capable himself of expressing love. He banishes Cordelia. At the end of the play, he looks into that face which earlier he banished from his sight, and he looks on it, it seems to me, with an outgoing of pure love. Look there, he says. Look her lips. And he dies.
It looks at one point as though things are going to resolve themselves. We're going to sort out an ending which is in some sense reassuring. And then this terrible direction enter Lear with Cordelia in his arms, the old man with the corpse of his daughter. And any hope of arriving at some sort of resolution is destroyed, I think, completely. Why should a horse, a dog, a rat have life and thou no breath at all? The question that I was thinking about earlier is unanswerable, actually. It is unanswerable.
Why should a dog, a horse, a rat have life and thou no breath at all? Thou come no more. Never, 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 never. Never. I pray you undo this button. Thank you, sir. Do you see this? Look on her. Look. Her lips. Look. There. Look. There. Poor naked wretches.
Open up the huge question of what it means to be a human being, looking at how people relate to one another. The drama revolves around one man, Lear, and his lack of insight leads to a series of tragedies. In his declining years, Lear, the central tragic hero, fails to understand his relationships with those closest to him, and he makes a series of fatal mistakes which plunge his entire society into chaos.
In recent decades, King Lear has come to supplant Hamlet in the popular imagination, I think, as the greatest of all Shakespeare's plays, in the sense of issues. It's a very earnest play. It's a play which is concerned with old age, which comes to everybody if they're lucky. It's concerned with filial ingratitude, to use the phrase in the play itself, that is to say, with relations between parents and children, which again is something of universal interest. And ultimately, of course, it's concerned very profoundly with death.
It asks the fundamental questions. In the middle of the play, when Lear is thinking about the evil that his daughter Regan has done to him, he says, let them
Shakespeare's King Lear, which first appeared in the quarto edition of 1608, is a tragedy which has provoked great debate over the centuries. King Lear has been described by academics as a Jacobean dramatic tragedy, and it does seem to have a universal quality which allows it to transcend the barriers of space and time. It deals with the quintessential nature of man. Shakespeare manages to open...
I think that it presents the greatest challenges to audiences as well as to performers, and also, in some ways, the greatest rewards.
I think King Lear perhaps is the greatest of Shakespeare's tragedies because it faces so directly the fundamental questions about human existence. It never pulls any punches. It goes, as one might say, for the jugular, time after time after time.
I think this is because it is so clearly a play that's profoundly concerned with very serious